dead horse. As always, I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And this week, we did an April Fool on ourselves. I say sounding like I'm a hack YouTube fraud, I guess. What? Wow, you won't believe what I bought yesterday and filled my room with.
I wish I'd bought that $100 Japanese Venusaur. Actually, there was a cheaper Japanese Meganium Pokemon card, and I love Meganium. Underrated Pokemon. I should have bought it.
We're stalling for time already, and that's a bad sign for this episode. So the April Fool's joke was actually me being positive that Kong versus Godzilla came out last week. It does not. It comes out tomorrow as of time of recording. So we'll be doing that next week, and instead, I guess we're just talking about the original, which theoretically shouldn't be a problem, except for the fact that we don't have much to say about it, honestly. We'll talk as much as we have, but if you look at this and see, oh, this episode is 32 minutes long, that's why.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I'll take the blame for this one, because I had suggested that we do a double feature on Kong versus Godzilla precisely for this reason, because I suspected that doing it, the way that we ended up doing it with each movie a separate week might not provide us with enough material. I mean, I guess there's a possibility that like something on the level of the stupid global warming scene could happen in Kong versus Godzilla, and I could be ranting about that again. But like, I didn't have that much to say about Skull Island, and it's the same studio, and like I knew that this was kind of the start. Like, really, this was all an excuse for me to watch this movie that we're talking about today, because I've been wanting to get more into schlock, like Showa era Godzilla, and this is sort of ground zero. I don't know that much about Godzilla Raids Again, but from what I understand, it's more serious, like the absolutely based Chad, like 54 original. So King Kong vs. Godzilla is sort of the schlock ground zero for the rest of the Showa era, and I thought it'd be fun to talk about it and watch it for that reason alone, as well as like, King Kong versus Godzilla. It's kind of one of those concepts like Batman versus Superman that on its face is pretty dumb, but like done correctly, there's a decent number of angles you could take with it. So I thought at least, if we did a comparison episode, we could get that much out of it. But we fucked up on the scheduling, which is at least partially, if not completely, my fault. So
It's definitely at least partially my fault as well, because I was 100% positive it came out, and I think I was even like, oh, it comes out this week, we should do it then, because the internet said it did, and I think it did release in certain theaters last week, but it did not release on HBO until the 31st, and it is not the 31st right now.
We could have been paying closer attention. I think we can both own this one a little bit, which leaves us with the schlock rubber suit original, which we both had basically the same reaction to, more or less.
I do think that if we hadn't spent last week talking about King Kong, we probably would have a bit more to say about this one, just because some of the things that we talked about last week make a resurgence in a weird way. But it feels lesser in a lot of ways. And to be clear, white dude here, I could be way off base on that one. But in as much that we basically hit all our bases last week in saying that racism, hey, it is in fact a bad thing and not something we should be doing. And we can reiterate that racism is a bad thing and not something we should be doing. But I mean, that's pretty much the big thing in this movie. And I don't know that we necessarily want to have a racism bad episode 2 weeks in a row, because that's just not fun. And I don't know. I get it. We should be having the conversation anyway, because racism is an important thing to talk about, and it's not supposed to be fun, and it's something you're supposed to face head on and everything. But honestly, I think the podcast in general has more of a light vibe most of it the time, and racism is anything but. It's a serious issue, y'all.
Yeah, and I think that like we got a lot of it out of the way last week, and I think like the only really like notable thing to say with regards to that is that I suspect that like when it comes to the other like Showa era Godzilla films, now I could be wrong. There could be some horrific, like, you know, Shin Godzilla surprises, you know, laying in wait in the other Showa era films. Based on what I know about them, I would guess not. But King Kong does kind of bring that baggage, right?
It also brings it in a way that, like, I don't know that. Listen, last week, if you listen to the episode, I actually went back and edited in a little bit more of my stuff about how King Kong could represent a slavery metaphor after Jackson's very impassioned speech about, you know, we need to talk about this anyway. And I'm like, you know what? You're fucking right. I'm going to work through my discomfort as someone who is, as I said, white and feels kind of weird talking about racism, not because we shouldn't be talking about racism, but because I would be afraid of misrepresenting it. So for a white movie to be racist in that way, I at least have some level of comfort of being like, hey, white people fucking suck. We're talking about a Japanese film in which Japanese people don blackface. That's another step beyond, and I am pushed even further out of my wheelhouse in ways that I don't know what to say. I, as I have said many of times, am an idiot.
No, I mean, I think that like that's even as our resident Japan expert, regrettably, I guess, I would not be fully confident speaking with any sort of like historical background or authority beyond just like the obvious, right? That like this sort of blatant racial stereotyping persisted in Japan longer than it did here. I mean, famously, Jinx and Mr. Popo from Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z raised quite a few eyebrows when they were imported. And both of them were actually toned down from the originals, if you can believe it.
The sound you are hearing, by the way, is many a folk tugging on their shirt collar in unison.
Yeah. And so I guess the thing about this is that lacking that knowledge, it's not as easy to see sort of the
systemic racism.
Yeah, sort of the thematic. And I wouldn't even be surprised if it was less prevalent just because this movie's so shallow and like the movie kind of owns that, but I don't know enough to say definitively one way or another, like to what degree the sort of ugliness that persists in King Kong 33 is carried over here. So I mean, we can kind of leave it at that, I suppose.
I think that is a good place to put our flag and move past it, because I think anything beyond that would be us speaking with authority that we do not have. So let's not do that. And instead, let's talk about things that we do have authority about, which is bad films, because we've watched a lot of those in our time. And I guess let's just take a minute here and explain the plot of King Kong versus Godzilla. Big monster fight is what the plot of the movie is, except it's really not, because there's only about 10 minutes of actual big monster fight. The rest of it is trying to make you care about characters that, with one exception, and that one exception is entirely because he is just so fucking wacky, you will not give a hot shit about. It tries and fails to create a human element to it. It tries and fails to create the tension and fear inherent to the first Godzilla movie, and just falls on its face in every way, shape, and form. I guess that's my way of saying I thought it was boring and didn't much care for it.
Yeah, I because Sean texted me when he was watching it, because he watched it before me, he was like, oh, this seems like wild and wacky. I think I'm gonna love this. And then like 10 minutes later was like, uh-oh, blackface. Never mind.
And unfortunately, the blackface is incredibly problematic, obviously, but you hit that point and it basically sucks all the fun that was happening before that blackface incident out of the film, and it just never returns in the same level. And I don't know whether it was because of the blackface. I'm sure it did not help when I saw that and went, oh no, it's back. Or if after that, like, the movie just genuinely got less interesting. It's hard to say. It's probably a little column A, a little column B.
Yeah, I'd agree, because like mercifully, the only thing I could say about like the fact that if there was that sort of thematic ugliness, being unable to identify it, was that like you do have kind of a sigh of relief when you finally get off that fucking island.
Yeah. I watched this with Sam, and she was like, "Oh my God, it's finally over. It's over. It's finally over." And then they make a surprise reappearance later.
It's very unfortunate. But I generally agree, because we had basically the same arc in that, like, the movie starts off, and I knew a little bit about the production and that it had sort of a weird history, and that, like, they wanted to do, like, a King Kong, like, they wanted Godzilla to fight, like, a famous monster, and it was supposed to be Frankenstein, and they got Ishiro Honda, the director of the original.
Oh my God, it was supposed to be Frankenstein?
Yeah, that explains the lightning. That's why King Kong has Deus Ex Machina lightning powers. It was supposed to be, like, a giant Frankenstein monster.
Oh my God, yeah, okay, yeah, that does explain the lightning, but also that would be rad as hell.
It would be rad. It would be rad.
Also, excuse you, it would have been Frankenstein's monster.
I'm going to put you in a locker. You have like a foot on me. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll find a way.
Listen, I might have a foot on you, but I am scrawny and also very weak. So honestly, just put any amount of... You could probably blow on me and I'd fall into a locker. So you're good.
It's a real... We got a real Wario and Waluigi dynamic, you and I. Oh, beautiful. But so, like, there's some interesting stuff, like, I knew about the production, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to watch it. One of the things that I knew was that at some point they got Ishiro Honda back, who was, like, pretty dismissive about the project. I was like, this is such a stupid corporate idea. Like, Godzilla versus King Kong, like, all the memes that I enjoy that, like, you see about the new one, like, Godzilla, like, atomic breath, like, 1,000 feet tall, like, you know, it survives, like, you know, a supernova, like the comics, and then, you know, King Kong is just monk. Like, those memes, like, even he was aware of them. He's like, this isn't even a fight. Like, this is so fucking dumb.
Now, to be fair, he is a very big monkey.
He's a pretty big monkey.
Like, if you think about like the normal size of a monkey, which, like, let's be generous and say 5 to 7 feet. I mean, it's a pretty big monkey.
I guess, like, you know, because famously they had to scale up King Kong. One of the reasons that it's not like a fight.
I really like that you just moved past it. Just like, nope, not fucking acknowledging that today. We're just keep it rolling.
Well, because one of the funny things about that is that, like, famously they had to scale up King Kong because he's such a monster manlet, as a meme that I just saw like an hour ago stated so eloquently. And that, like, you know, if you think about King Kong, like, canonically his height's like 30 feet. That's like, King Kong's only like 5 times taller than, like, you know, your average gorilla. Like, that's not that much of a multiplier.
But you give him electric powers.
You give him electric powers, that keeps him in the game. I do love... All right, I'll say this. If you want the short version, my ability to recommend a movie And we'll go back more into like where I think the movie falls flat and where it succeeds. But the bottom line is, if you're interested in watching it at all, just find a 10-minute cut of the rubber suit fight, because it is terrific fucking memes. I'll say that. I was cackling and wheezing like a child at the end. I did enjoy it very much.
And it helps a lot if you have not watched an hour and 20 minutes of boring and racism beforehand, because while I did get some enjoyment out of the rubber suit fights, I was too far drained at that point to get any real enjoyment. So
yeah, so it's probably a strict improvement on the experience. The other thing too is that it's a lot easier to find than the full original cut of the film.
It's a tricky one to find, I'll tell you that much.
Even for good stuff, I find it hard sometimes to recommend like going out of your way to like hunt down something, let alone something that I could really only recommend the last 10 minutes. So I guess like kind of the sad thing is like, coming back around to this idea that like the director of Godzilla is like 2 movies in, and what have they done to my like, personal allegory about like, national trauma and war, making him fight this stupid fucking monkey. Is that like that attitude is in the film, and that's sort of what makes it seem like it's going to be interesting, like a corporate satire that like, the pharmaceutical company wants to like enlist a giant monster to like boost sales, and the wacky like boss man who overacts just chews the fucking scenery at every scene that he's in. He's wonderful. He's the best part of the movie.
His name is Taco, and I know that because they made one joke that made me laugh, where they said something about an octopus came and attacked, and he's like, "Oh, Taco," and somebody goes, "The boss?" And there was like a little editor's note, Keikaku means plan, underneath. It's like, Taco is the boss's name and also means octopus in Japan. And I'm like, ha. Ha.
So like, it seems like the movie's gonna take that really like cynical corporate satire route for a while, and that's sort of interesting, but like it never moves much beyond that by just sort of making that comparison and having it play out. Basically the structure of the movie is you have sort of the interesting setup with the corporate satire. You have basically straight up a King Kong movie played unabridged, and racism and all. Then you have a shortened, truncated version of the original Godzilla, and then you have the rubber suit fight. You finally get what you came for, which was the most disappointing thing, was that like it would have been easier for me to recommend the movie like as a curio and like as a satire if like it's not too long after we finally escape that fucking island, Godzilla and King Kong kind of like square up, and it seems like the fight's about to get started, but then King Kong just sort of like lumbers away and goes to like take a lady to do the King Kong thing, and it's boring. This movie could have stood to be, even if you try to compartmentalize the fucking racism, like this movie could have stood to be like 40 minutes shorter. Like you could have cut to like the rubber suit fight as soon as they squared up, and you wouldn't have missed a thing.
Well, you would have missed that Godzilla in this version is, I guess spoilers, I don't know, who gives a fuck? We've already explained what's coming. Follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. Fuck off. So you would have missed that Godzilla is now suddenly weak to lightning in this one, which is not something that had been established for it, because like they literally did the exact same thing in the first Godzilla movie where they set up a bunch of power lines, and I'm like, oh, they did this before. It's not going to work. Why are we doing this again? Because this movie does seem to acknowledge that Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again is part of this universe in some capacity, and instead it's just like, nah, he doesn't like electricity anymore. And okay, sure, why not? I don't know. It's so small, and it really shouldn't bother me. But I guess I kind of care about Godzilla lore in some way. I don't fucking know. Shoot me into the sun.
I noticed that that too. And it's just more evidence that like it's funny because I went and I looked at Ishiro Honda's like filmography and saw a lot of the other like schlock. Because I mean he was involved with a lot of the other Showa era stuff, and it just made me wonder. I'm like, did he eventually come to accept like, you know, schlock Godzilla for what it was? Because he seemed everything seems pretty checked out here.
It very much feels like he came into it with an idea. Somebody said no, he went, all right, fuck it, whatever.
Yeah, like I can't believe I'm doing this shit. And like I imagine that future Showa era films, as they kind of lean into the camp, are more fun than this. Whereas this is kind of trying to be a real Godzilla movie, and most regrettably a real King Kong movie. It just doesn't really work as either of those things, although it is very funny to watch King Kong just get knocked down by Godzilla over and over again. Like it is like a schoolyard bully. Like he just imagine like, all right, I mean, this is pretty high praise for me. Like, if we're taking a comparable versus movie, you know, Batman versus Superman, imagine the part where Batman hits Superman with the toilet, but, like, that's the entire fight. Like, 15 minutes of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's accurate, and except in this case, you can see the green screen artifacting on it still, which makes it all the better, honestly.
It's spectacular stuff. If you're just watching that fight, it's a grand old time, and that's really all that you need. Because on the other hand, I was also thinking that, like, speaking of Batman versus Superman, that's another one of those pairings that's like, you know, people kind of look at, and even like your average like normie is like, what? Like Superman is like fucking God. Batman's a guy with money. Like this isn't even a fight. You know, in that case, like that's sort of the fun potentially, and like, you know, better versions of that pair up than, you know, the fucking Zack Snyder movie. But like even the Zack Snyder movie acknowledges that there's quite a bit of stuff you can do with that like, you know, the tricksiness of like, you know, that David and Goliath scenario of like Batman overcoming a inherently stronger foe using only his wit. They're like clashing ideals and methods. Like there's stuff there. And I think that similarly, you can go, if you are just completely disgusted with how like blatant corporate schlock this very premise is, like, you know, that, you know, if you really lean into the satire, you can do that and make that work.
Which, again, they seem to be doing for about 10 minutes, and then I have to imagine that someone came up, slapped his hand, and said, no, this is a serious, quote-unquote, product by Toho. Make it that. And they did, and it suffered for it.
Yeah, sure. It's so surprisingly straightforward for so much of the run.
Yeah, it is just dead-faced, just this is what happens. This happened in Godzilla, this happened in King Kong. I guess it's happening in this one too, but they're just going to happen at the same time, and it'll make both of them worse for it. Well, actually, it won't make King Kong worse for it, because I think this is still a strict upgrade from King Kong in a lot of ways. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable talking about King Kong, period.
As far as we can tell from our limited perspective, this is an upgrade for King Kong, though it is definitely a downgrade for Godzilla.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that, like, you know, King Kong versus Godzilla, one of the nice things about having that as a pairing is that, like, kind of like a Batman versus Superman, there are opportunities for you to do something with that, you know, removes a lot of the ickiness from King Kong just by, like, sort of the nature of their characters, and that, like, oh, like, mammal versus reptile, like, pure creature of, like, the natural world versus a, you know, nuclear monster corrupted by man. There's a similar David and Goliath thing going on. Like, a lot of the... God, it was amazing seeing how much... Shigeru Miyamoto must love him some fucking giant monster movies, because, like, the way that King Kong deals with Godzilla in this is just how Mario throws Bowser around in Mario 64.
I did not even think about that. You're entirely right.
He's going for the tail. And not that I expect my stupid rubber suit movie to do this. I'm glad that like the final like 10-15 minutes were as unabashedly stupid as they were. But like in theory, you could do something kind of like that like because of his like, you know, more like natural, like mammal, like brain. King Kong can be a little trixier than other kaiju, whereas like Godzilla is just kind of a tank. And like, you know, there's that contrast again between like King Kong. You know, we kind of see this in Skull Island. King Kong, defender of the natural world, versus Godzilla, like corrupted beast. Sure, these versus matchups on some level are inherent kind of corporate schlock. I guess like my disagreement with, you know, maybe Ishiro Honda's perspective, and this is perhaps because I was raised in like a, you know, corporate schlock environment, is that like you can still, even within that framework, you can still do interesting stuff with these kind of franchise movies, right? You know, again, not that I would especially expect that from this like 60s rubber suit mess. I would have preferred if the movie went just committed to like the disdainful, cynical satire bit. It just doesn't really know where to go beyond just like pointing out how stupid it is, though, and then just doing the thing, which is disappointing.
It also doesn't know how to end the movie.
No, I think this also had some corporate influence as well, though, because I know that like, oh, another potentially interesting angle is that like, because King Kong is so much a like American creation, a creation of like American cinema, and Godzilla's a symbol of Japanese cinema. There is like the nationality angle, and that is something that like Toho, I think, was concerned about, and that they didn't want to make like, I don't think they wanted to make too strong of a statement, so they just kind of tumble into the sea and King Kong kind of sulks away. I think basically out of like seniority, because King Kong came first and they were using and you know, Godzilla was Toho's own, you know, property, so maybe they felt like they needed to, you know, they didn't want to stretch themselves, but like there was sort of a politics to that, so much so that there were rumors that in the American version King Kong wins and Godzilla wins in the Japanese version, but those apparently aren't true. We didn't watch the English version, but yeah, the movie does just fizzle out.
I mean, I apologize. You completely took what I was about to say. So,
oh, sorry.
I was just about to feed into that because that was the one fact I had about this movie, and now I have nothing.
I'm sorry I cucked you so hard on that. I didn't mean to.
No, it's okay. What else you got?
I mean, what else do I got? I guess that's like, that's sort of the problem, is that if I am talking about these, like, you know, like I had mentioned sort of last week, one of the reasons I'd wanted to do these episodes, why I wanted to talk about the original Godzilla and why I wanted to talk about King Kong and got more than I bargained for, was that
you got more than you bargained. You got more than you bargained.
Well,
for.
I'm the one that made the devil's bargain in the first place. Like you, if if we're going with the kaiju metaphor, I'm the guy who, like, you know, made like a summoning circle in the harbor and like summoned the monster because I wanted to see it, and it was crushed by my own hubris. You were like a civilian just like sleeping in your house.
Whoa, look at that. Oh, no.
So I am interested in like the, you know, sort of cultural, like symbolic, not even, you know, necessarily intentional meaning behind these sort of giant monsters as like cultural signifiers. And you can make a movie with a lot of interesting stuff, which is where I'd like to do the comparison with the new one, but like I haven't seen the new one. And also, I mean, I haven't seen Godzilla 2014, but of the two MonsterVerse movies that I have seen, I didn't especially care for either of them. They were okay at best to me. And also this new one, I believe, is directed by the guy who did the live-action Death Note movie.
That is entirely correct. Yes, it is. So
I'm not especially hopeful that I'm going to get, like, you know, my fun, you know, like culturally significant Godzilla versus Kong movie as a chaser to this. I imagine it'll just be more of King of the Monsters.
From my understanding, it's very much less. If and this is going to be a big if you can just sit back and enjoy it, it's apparently a pretty decent slugfest in that regard. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how well that's gonna fly for you in particular.
I mean, maybe. Like, I guess it depends. Like,
Well, I guess let me put it this way: take your expectations and fucking chuck them.
well, no,
Just
I mean,
make it as low as possible. Don't expect a big cultural significance thing. Don't expect some broad, sweeping statement about the nature of humanity, and just be like, monk, go punch lizards, see what happened.
I guess what bothers me about the newer movies is, and one of the reasons that like I was more interested to talk about the old stuff is that often a lot of those, because these are like big, dumb, stupid monster movies, and like that stuff is kind of baked in, right? But it's often like really unintentional, and it's often a lot easier to see kind of in hindsight. And not only that, but like with sort of the genesis of these characters before they've kind of gone through the franchise machine. Again, regrettably, we did not like what we found with King Kong, not one bit. I guess now that I have no expectations, maybe I will be more prepared. I like something about like I think it's the way that the newer movies kind of gesture at having symbolism that irks me. Like we're not committing to the bit. And I like it. If it's a bit, you must commit. That's my motto.
Again, I do think that the new King Kong committed to the bit as hard as it needed to, honestly. I just don't think it committed hard enough for you. I think it did exactly what it set out to do, which was rebuke what the original King Kong was and make a fairly decent, fun action movie out of it. And I stand by that. I thought it was pretty good and did what it wanted to do. In some cases that did harm it in some capacity, in which it went too far the other way with the whole racism thing, and turned around accidentally, oops, we did a racism against, the Pacific Islanders, which is not good. But
how many angles can we do a racism from in this franchise? Let's find out.
It was rough for sure. But yeah, I still think that it was fine and better than War King of Monsters, whatever the fuck that one was called, by a country mile, because that movie still fell apart just through the fact that it got so bogged down and hooked on that angle of it, and did not commit fully to anything, and was like, no, you have to care about these characters, and you just couldn't. And King Kong was kind of like, you know what? Care about him if you want to. Enjoy the movie if you don't. It's fine. And I think that's fine. I think that's fine.
No, I mean, you're not wrong. I guess like, I don't know. I think we both are weirdly invested in Godzilla at this point, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of the original Godzilla, and like that's one of the reasons I was so offended by Shin Godzilla, because it tried to return to that more political angle and was like an affront to everything that the original Godzilla was. So I don't know. Maybe I was kind of hoping that King Kong versus Godzilla, the '60s one, would be like the opportunity to sort of revel in like stupid Showa era like rubber suit schlock, and that ended up only being 15 minutes. So
if that, unfortunately,
we
did see the big balloons though. That was a thing that we saw.
I really hope, maybe I just need to make my own cut. Like starting from when they decide to airdrop in King Kong with balloons like a fucking Fortnite avatar onto Godzilla.
I was watching that happen, and I'm like, this is a Dale Gribble plan. Dale Gribble is somewhere down there being like, I know what we'll do.
If the whole movie were like that, that would have been based, but it wasn't. And I think we're brushing up on the limits of what we can say, because there's only so many ways to say that.
Yeah, it is not what we were hoping it would be, which is greatly unfortunate. I'm at least hoping that the new one is what I want it to be, which is mostly just more of King Kong 2017 and Godzilla 2014, which is just a fun monster movie. Look at cool special effects, have a good time. Okay, bye-bye, good night.
I guess like I'm trying to think from that angle, it's like what? Because on the one hand, I do appreciate a little bit of build up. Like that's something that the original Godzilla does pretty well is kind of that build up before the first sort of rampage, before we see our big rubbery boy. On the other hand, though, like maybe just because if we're getting so far away from kind of the thoughtful monster movies, like maybe I really just do want it to be a clean 90 minutes of like monk versus lizard. So
well, if nothing else, I can say that it is under 2 hours, so we have that going for us.
That is a relief. That is good. That's a good sign.
Yeah, I think it's like an hour 51 or something like that. So it might run a bit long for your taste, but it's at least going to be fairly tight in that regard.
Yeah. No, and again, to clarify, like I know that I am a weirdo when it comes to this like popcorn like fiction stuff, and I way overthink things. I mean, to be fair, I am like like a self-styled like writer. I would hope that I care about fiction a lot and like think about these things. If you're gonna make these things, someone's got to think about them, I guess, right? But like maybe I will, since I'll have a lot of time to dog sit. I'll sit down for 3 hours and watch the Peter Jackson version and give a little mini review there. Because that, again, in my memory, that sort of like set kind of the tone that I'm looking for. And that like, because that movie had some pretty hardcore, like brutal King Kong fighting dinosaur action. But it also had goofy, fun little character moments like the ice skating. So like maybe, yeah, I'm not expecting like, one of the things that was so terrible about Batman versus Superman was like the, gods come from the sky, devils come from man, like all that fucking Zack Snyder like pontificating. That's not necessarily what I'm asking for. But I don't know.
Anything else you want to say?
I think we're done here.
I've been Sean McKinda. Find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda.
I've been Jackson Keller. Find me on Twitter at Jackson J. Keller. Fuck.
Podcast at BADH_cast on Twitter. Patreon.com/BADHcast. Still paused. Still don't know what you can get access to via that. Thanks to Lords of Heavy for theme song is Suicide. Also take off the album High Octane Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go check them out wherever you can. Also, thanks to heavyuserslaterstate.com. There's a little button of us on the corner that you should absolutely go click on. There's a bunch of really talented people doing a bunch of really talented writing over there. So definitely hang out and see what they have to say. Next week, if it's not already painfully clear, we're talking about Godzilla versus King Kong, the new one. Let's see how that is.
We can finally move on from fucking King Kong. I'm so sorry. It's all my fault.
This has been some of the worst 4 episodes for me we've ever done. I'm very ready to be done with this. I am so ready to be able to talk about things again and not just sit and feel bad about it. So let's do it.
What did we do before King Kong?
I don't know anymore.
Didn't we do House? House was fun.
House was fun. Three episodes then. 3 episodes. I don't know. It feels like we've been trapped in this hell for literal months. So bye.